Hello and welcome to the channel. If you've spent a lot of time in the power scaling community recently, you've likely seen a variation of this meme. However, something I imagine you didn't know about this image is that recently it's caused its own fandom known as the Scritters community. And today we're just going to give a bit of a rundown on what Scritters are. Scritters, also known as power jacks, are creatures who inhabit the Scritterverse and represent elements of both power scaling and narratives as a whole. The typical life of a Scritter begins as what is known as a fodder, who, as they age, may develop enough passion and connection to a particular concept that it becomes their title. What does this mean? Well, unlike fodders, title Scritters often gain abilities and improve stats that reflect what their title is. Ultimately, it's passion, perspective, and connection that fuels a Scritter's connection to their title and how their abilities reflect it. To be more specific, imagine passion as paint and perception as art skills. If a Scritter such as Speed perhaps had a high enough opinion of speed and had a specific perception of it, they could perhaps use their title to do things like time travel or phasing, in the same way a character like the Flash can use their speed to do so. However, this is reliant on them having enough passion, as the more passion you have, the more energy and power you can kind of put into your perception in terms of how you can develop your title and evolve. For example, a strength with a minor passion could likely only blow up a planet or so, whereas a strength with a massive amount of passion for the concept of strength could punch apart multiverses. It's important to note that the Scritters themselves aren't really aware of the intricacies of their own system and believe it's more vague and less detailed in that sense. Aside from that, though, Scritter titles can be nearly anything. A stat like strength or speed, an element or item like fire, or perhaps even something more abstract and absurd like popularity. There are, in some rare cases, Scritters who were born with titles or got them not through passion. However, that's a long story, so for now, we're just going to go over some more of the basic. Scritter culture is pretty much just power scaling culture. Concepts and aspects of power scaling are just part of everyday Scritter life. For example, the way weapons are ranked in the Scritterverse is by using terms like alter and hyper, although in a slightly different sense. This is also relevant in the lore as a whole, as can be seen with fraud allegations. In the Scritterverse, fraud allegations are a disease, somewhat akin to cancer. When a Scritter gets them, they're pretty much destined for death, and fraud allegations are one of the few things that can permanently kill titled Scritters. And as mentioned before, this concept of power scaling being their culture can be seen pretty much everywhere, from their movies and media, which is mostly just power scaling memes like the street tier slasher, to their entire kind of society's ideology. Scritters spend 90% of their time, if they have a title, fighting each other. And you may think, well, that sounds like a violent, horrible place. And to be fair, you probably are right to some extent. However, there is something I haven't mentioned about title Scritters. Title Scritters have an incredibly powerful healing factor that only activates when they're outside of combat. This healing factor can bring back a titled Scritter from nearly anything being erased from existence, cut to ribbons, torn apart from time, destroyed on a conceptual level, you name it. As such, it's mostly just titles who fight each other, with fodders carrying out regular days not that far off from ours. The healing factor can be stretched somewhat if losses are repeated and brutal and you are constantly healing back from absurd injuries like being splattered into blood. But overall, you're not at risk if you're a title Scritter of dying. Scritters occupy pretty much the entire Scritterverse, with mortal Scritters taking up the entirety of the reality disk, and even a few Scritters like Damage existing beyond it. However, the majority of the Scritterverse stories take place in just one universe and mainly on one planet, Scritterworld. Scritterworld is actually a Scritter itself, although it doesn't really have any capabilities besides the usual regen that we see for other titled Scritters, as can be seen by how it repeatedly is fine after planet-destroying attack. And Scritterworld is split into pretty much three distinct sections. The world that's kind of akin to ours in terms of a mixture of ground and land and natural elements, the White Void and the Dark Void, which are where the majority of Scritterverse stories take place, hence the white or black background. I'm sure you have a lot of questions about the Scriptiverse, and I could probably answer them for hours. How it was made, who's the strongest Scritter, what passion truly is. But like I said, that would take hours. So instead of making just one big video on it, from here on out, I'm going to make lots of different videos talking about various aspects of the Scriptiverse, from its creation to first gods to a deeper understanding of how passion works. So, with that in mind, if you have any questions or you want me to cover any specific topics, please do make sure to leave them in the comments as questions. I'll make sure to try and do everything I can. But for now, I'll take my leave. I do hope to see you again at some other point in a different video, but that's all she wrote for now. Have a nice day.